listening to The Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Gulseth.
It is Monday, September 16th. Welcome back.
Thanks. Wait, I went somewhere?
Yes, you went away.
Doesn't feel like I did.
You went away. You rode
I played bikes. It was fun.
For a week?
Well, I wasn't playing bikes all week.
Yes, you were.
We were learning.
Oh, sure.
Sitting in a room learning. We did get to play bikes, though, on a cyclocross course for one day. It was fun. It's all over my Facebook if anyone really cares.
What's to see what you did with bikes last week.
Yeah.
Good week on deck. Last week was President's orientation and installation of presidents and a variety of officers and members of boards as well. That was on Friday evening, so we'll get to share a little bit on that, hopefully later this week or early next week, about the just convention follow-up, that sort of thing. We'll do that with Dr. John Sias, Secretary of Synod, coming up later this week or early next week. We'll follow up with him. It is Monday. It means it's Mental Health Monday, and we get to check in with Deaconess Heidi Goehmann here in just a moment. Thanks to Concordia University Wisconsin for supporting the Coffee Hour. Find out more about Concordia University Wisconsin at cuw.edu.
Live uncommon.
I said that myself last week. Every day.
Oh, was it weird?
It was really weird when I would say I'm Andy Bates and then there was nothing to follow. But now it's time to join Deaconess Heidi Goehmann for Mental Health Monday. Good morning, Heidi.
Good morning. Always good to be with you guys.
Happy Monday. Happy Monday.
Yes. Mental Health Mondays are the best kind of Mondays, I feel like.
I think I have to agree with you. I was driving in and I was like, what are we talking? Oh, right. It's Mental Health Monday. This is great.
This is a good way to start Monday.
It really is.
All right,
I feel like Mondays, like people need Mental Health Monday. You know, it helps us be aware of what we need.
We should feel refreshed after the weekend and ready to go.
Yeah,
but nope.
Nope.
Especially like church workers and those who have responsibilities on Sunday mornings. I think we started a new season
Sunday's
at church,
a work day.
lots of teaching. I love teaching. I get to lead Bible class for a group of folks at our church, but there's a lot of prep time and then decompressing as well. So so let's get into today's topic: why ask for help? Why are we afraid to ask for help, Heidi?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's like a lot wrapped up into that, you know, kind of like a ball of yarn and stuff. And it has to do especially with our family of origin, I think, and the way we grew up and what was acceptable. And as far as reaching out for what we needed, and also people's response before that we've had, you know, whether people have been able to help us when we give in a bid to get some help. And that can be just really personal. You know, maybe we didn't get it from our mom or dad when we were sad a single time. And maybe that was something we got sometimes, you know, and so those kind of things complicate the matter. And then you take that, like maybe we've gone to our pastor once and that person wasn't very responsive, or maybe we tried a counselor and that, you know, it wasn't a really good fit that time for us. And so there's all those different places that we might have tried before that we just didn't get it. And then there's also like, you know, stigma, and this idea in our culture that it's not okay to ask for help, that there's something not right about us then, or that we are weak. And it's sad to say that this still thrives in the church, a place that we absolutely don't believe it. You know, I think one of the best mental health verses that I can think of is, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness, which means that all of that we just talked about, like we don't believe in it. We believe that God brings strength at the very moment where we identify our weakness and our need for help. He also calls himself and the Holy Spirit the helper. That's their title. So if we cannot, engage, I think, in the act of seeking help, then it really is like detrimental to our spiritual relationship. And so I think at some place we have to deal with that between us and God, and then we can be able to deal with it between us and people.
Mm-hmm. Even the word help, it's like, sometimes it's just so hard to say. Like I know in my brain I need to ask for help.
I need some assistance.
Right. Yeah. Right.
Fancy words might make it better, right?
But even just like saying those words, even if I know I need it and I know I really should ask for help in whatever situation, just saying those words to somebody, there's a lot of vulnerability that happens when you speak those words out loud to somebody.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And we don't really like the word vulnerability because that sounds kind of fluffy and cushy and social psychology-ish and stuff. And so I think tearing away those things too, that again, help is a biblical word. I cannot tell you how often it's used in the Old Testament. Like I should pull that out for this series in particular. But, in the Psalms, especially those places where people do bear themselves before God, not just in the narratives that we hear, in other places of scripture, but the Psalms are those places where we get to hear them really ask for help. And I think that we just have to come to a place where we practice. I think we talked about this on the coffee hour with Worker Wellness one time, but, just practice saying the word. And I think I even made you guys like say it on air. Like,
I remember that.
I need help. Right. And it's one of those really uncomfortable things. You have to practice it. Like, just say it to the people, say it to God first. I think that really helps because that's a private place that you can be absolutely safe and free of judgment with Jesus Christ, standing in our stead. He is asking for help on our behalf when we fail. But then we also can do it physically with God in our prayer times. We can write it on a piece of notebook paper and pray for the things we need help for. And then we can say it to those closest to us, a trusted friend, someone in our family, whoever those safe people are for you, because it's different for everybody. Like not everybody does have the family that's going to be safe where they can ask for help. That's what our local church is meant to stand in that gap for us for also. So find the person you can say it to, and then continue on. I have actually myself been trying to get my EAP, 6 visits lately, to a counselor locally because we moved a couple years ago and transitioning and all that good stuff. And so I need help. And it's hard. Like no one will return my phone calls. And so it's like a really good practice for me to understand how people feel and to keep asking for help, even when I don't get the response I need the first time.
Well, so much of this revolves around community too. In order to ask for help, you have to have somebody to ask for help. Mm-hmm. How does God use our neighbors and use that community when we ask for help? How does God provide for our needs through those other people?
Yeah, dare I call it a mighty and mysterious work of God. It's pretty wild how he knits in us this need for community. Isolation is real. And that's a tool of the devil to keep us from connecting to God and to keep us from connecting to one another. And the church especially is not our idea. It's God's idea. And so he created this place that we can have community. And then when we look around us, he expands that really. He puts his spirit into us so we can go out into our very literal communities, that we call towns and places and neighborhoods and things. And when we reach out for help, someone else is freed in order to also reach out for help. We have just lifted the stigma for someone else. And that is a massively mysterious, powerful thing that the Spirit does between people. And then, I think being involved in community before you need help, even though, I'm a believer that every single day we need help. That's just how we live. But being in community before you have kind of that crisis moment or the moment where you just are at your last, the last straw has been taken and such. That is God's work to give us a place where we can fall, to give us a place that's safe.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it easier, and maybe this is a guy thing, not sure, why is it easier to acknowledge that God provides for us through our neighbors in other first article needs, such as food and shelter, but not necessarily mental or emotional issues?
Oh, that's really profound, Andy.
In
I
less
have
than
to
3 minutes.
sit on that for a minute. I know. No, I'm gonna have to circle back to that sometime. We absolutely do believe, and I think part of it is control. We have a hard time stewarding as it is. We have a hard time believing that God really is in charge of all of this and that it's not ours. And so especially with those deep personal things and, emotions are part of mental health. Relationships are part of mental health. it's a very spiritual thing. I think mental health really touches on shame and guilt and grace and those really big concepts that are vulnerable, like Sarah said. And so we want to believe that we have control over it when really, like, God is, the master of all. He is over all. And so what does that mean for our mental health? I think it's a good question. It's probably a good question for another day. But at the same time, yeah, right. But at the same time, like, I think honoring who he is in our life is always a really good place to start to get to a place where we can wrestle with the other stuff. That's a good question. Open the first article of the creed and ask, like, okay, God, what are you in charge of in my life? Show me. And he does that in his word.
We have just a minute left. Are emotions like anxiety, anxiousness, or sadness okay? How can they be useful if they are okay?
Yeah, I have good news about that since we have a minute left, is that after we go through the series on help, which we'll talk a little bit more like about how to get help and some just more practical things about help itself and helping someone else, we will go through a series that is about emotions, both the kind of what I like to think of as uncomfortable emotions, like the ones that are a little bit more difficult for us to experience, even though you'll find out that, like, I do not believe that any of the emotions are wrong. Like, that God is the creator of all things, and he's the creator of my ability to feel anger and sadness and anxiousness and all that stuff. And they have a purpose. It's what I do with them that is often a problem. And so we'll talk about that more, because I think that, we do not want to get lost in this idea that some are right and some are wrong. Again, we don't believe that. That's an idea that God doesn't sanctify all of us, and that's not a thing we believe in.
Deaconess Heidi Goehmann, licensed clinical social worker, got a new book out too as well. Name of that book?
The Mighty and the Mysterious.
The Mighty and... See, wasn't that a nice segue? Thank you so much, Heidi. Always good to have Mental Health Mondays with you. We'll talk to you next week.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up in just a little bit, we revisit a conversation with Pastor Golden in the beginning, Understanding Genesis. You're listening to the Coffee Hour. I'm Andy Bates.
I'm Sarah Golseth.